Onward and upwards. Hi everybody, and welcome back to Plastic Models by a Regular Dude and part number 3 of the Academy 1/35 scale U.S. Marine Corps M50A1 Ontos. Quick recap. In the last episode, I got steps 1 through 4 completed, which is the lower hull and the running gear. Also, because the way this thing is put together, I went ahead and did the weathering on the inside portions of the hull underneath the sponsons, because it would be pretty impossible to get in there really good with some weathering materials. So what I did is I primed it using Mr. Surfacer 1500 cut with some Mr. Leveling thinner, and then I sprayed SMS US Olive Drab, which for the purists out there I know is most likely incorrect for a US Marine Corps vehicle, but because this is going to be covered in weathering and such, and that's the closest green I have, it should be fine. So with that, ready to move on to step number 5. So step 5 is the rear plate of the lower hull. So I'm going to cut all these parts off here: B52, 2 C28s, C35, B5, B16, B61, and get those cleaned up and ready to glue together. Alright, so here's a quick little thing. So on this back plate here, you've got these two, I'm going to call them toe shackle mounts, where you can put some clevises, toe clevises or whatever. Then you've got this gate part here with a handle. Then you're supposed to use these two little teeny tiny parts, one there and one there, and it forms a sort of a hinge. Okay, now it doesn't say not to glue it, so obviously it doesn't have to be opened, but it's probably easiest, I'm thinking, and this is the way I'm doing it, to get this lined up, because it butts up against these two parts here. There are like some very slight indentations on the top of that gate that fit right where these little round bits are. So put that in place, and then just touch a little bit of glue to the gate part to get it to, obviously glue in place. And then from there, once that dries, I know it's not going to move around, then it'll be much easier, because there's like little teeny tiny pins and little teeny tiny recesses right there. It'll be easier to glue this part onto this back plate and then onto this hinge part on this little gate, if that makes any sense. So I can put a little bit of glue, tag it in place, and it's good to go. That way, I'm not trying to put these in place and then maneuver that and make sure everything stays lined up. Probably nothing like, totally revealing. It's probably simple enough for everybody to figure out, but I figured I'd just talk about how I'm doing it. All right, and there it is. So that ends step number 5. So we can call this video done. Just kidding. Time to move on to the second part of step 5, gluing it on the back. Okay, with that in place, now we need to move on to the upper hull. So same thing, I'm just going to start cutting off a bunch of parts and gluing them in place. All right, before I get too far on gluing a bunch of small parts on this upper hull, I'm going to go ahead and glue this upper hull part on here, I think. What I'm going to do is I'm going to test fit the tracks, because I'm not sure I'll be able to get the tracks on after the fact. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assemble these tracks, put all these small parts in here so I don't lose them, because I want to be able to clamp the front of this thing without worrying about small parts. Now, the way this fits, there's a couple of pins and a couple of holes, and it fits nicely. Now you can see there is a seam there, and that is not a seam that one wants to remove, because this upper armor plate here laps over this part here. I've looked at some photographs and that is clearly the way it is. So it's just a matter of making sure it fits really flush and making sure there's no like gap, but the seam can stay. So let me get these tracks together and then we'll look further at this. Okay, so I got the tracks together, and just a tip, it tells you to melt these things with like a hot screwdriver or knife or something like that, and that's fine, but my recommendation would be that you just barely start it with the melting and then smash it with your finger. That way you don't risk damaging the connection and what, you know, I mean, the details whack right there anyway, but you don't want to damage it by burning it too much. But it goes together pretty good. So anyway, I had to do some research and figure out what color I should paint the tracks as a base coat. And it took me a while, and finally I just, you know, realized, like, hey dummy, find a walk around of the Ontos. And the tracks are actually two continuous belts with this part stretching across here is metal, and then the other side is a backing plate that is metal, and they seem to be just bolted together. So with that in mind, now that's from what I can see on this photo. So right or not, that's the way it looks, and I'm 99% sure that's correct. And then, you know, obviously the guide teeth are metal. So anyway, that is that's what they're made out of. So what I'm going to do is I want to paint them kind of a dark rusty color just as a base, and then pretty much the rest of what you'll be able to see is going to be dusty, dirty tracks. And I'm not sure if the detail is enough that I'll be able to highlight it with metal, but we'll see. But for my base color, I'm going to use good old Tamiya. I'm going to use Red Brown XF64. Now the reason I'm using this, because I've gotten away from using Tamiya much, just because it is so ultra flat. I have a hard time doing like washes and stuff like that on it. So I only use this for certain things, but I want this to be like a really flat finish, so the dust effects from washes and pigments and stuff will stick good and kind of evenly. And for the thinner for this, I'm not going to use MLT because that's, you know, a lacquer based thinner, although that works with Tamiya paints really well. I'm going to use Tamiya's own X20A, which is an alcohol based thinner, so I don't have to worry about potential damage from a hot solvent on these tracks. So I'm gonna get those painted up, and then I will come back and install them and do some weathering on them before I attach the upper hull. All right, fast forward a little bit here. I have got the tracks installed. Oh, this side looks a little better than this one, but for some reason this one was a little tighter. But here's the thing, there's the color. So I think that'll work out good for the dust and all that kind of stuff. And I think I'll be able to do the metal. I'll just have to lightly hit it with some graphite or something. But one important thing I've noticed in the builds I was able to find online of this particular kit, that quite a few of them, well, most of the ones I looked at, did not have this sag going on. And so like the track would be kind of bowed up right here just because the natural, you know, circular way that they end up after you attach the ends together. So I endeavored to figure out a way myself to get the appropriate sag, and it was actually quite simple. What I did is I used these two cotton bud things here, Q-tips, whatever, and here's what I did. For the front, I used this small one, and I just got a dab of gel super glue and put it on this track skid right here, and then put this in place like that. Then in the back, I just got some, attaching it to this skid right here would have put it too far down and it would have had a kink in the sag. So what I did is I just applied some cement, some of the gel super glue on the wheel itself, and put this Q-tip here to kind of force it to not bow up right there. So it's glued to about right here. And then this just naturally formed this sag. Now, if you have a set of tracks that has a kink in it, you want to make sure that the kink is in a place where it's under tension, like on one of the wheels or even on the bottom. So I was able to get some decent sag. All right, so there's that. So then after I did that, I got this, I glued this part here, and I glued these parts here. Now I had to be careful to, I did the front first and let that set up, and then I did the back, and I had to put some pressure on it from the sides because it was flared out just a little bit. But other than that, it fits really well. So lack of issues there. So now I can take this, I took this back plate here, I cut it off the sprue, and I just wanted to test fit and make sure everything was lined up properly, and it looks good. So with that, I can continue on with more of these small parts, especially the ones on the front, now that I've got that glued together and it's ready to go. So I'll just continue on with those. All right, so step number 6 is complete. A few notes. Everything goes together quite well, and these little fragile looking things, they're just attached to the end of this actuating rod, or whatever you want to call it, this rod here, which is a shallow hole and a small pin. So using Tamiya extra thin, glued one at a time, held it in place, manipulated around a little bit to make sure it stayed horizontally correct, both this way, and to make sure these two were lined up parallel to each other. So it all went well. I'm just really stoked with the way this thing's fitting together. So with part number 6 being completed, I'm ready to move on to 7, which is basically the same stuff with the addition of a little bit of photo etch. So I'm going to cut off all the plastic stuff, get it glued into place, and then I'll talk a little bit about the photo etch. All right, as you can see here, I am working on some photo etch. Now, I really couldn't do any video on this because it's just too much going on. But it's pretty simple. The instructions lay it out pretty well how to do it. Big thing is annealing it. I use this torch right here, Spermsomatic. Very simple. Lock it there, hit the trigger, boom, let go, it's done. And soften that brass up, and then it wraps really well. So I've got that there. This one goes here like this, but I'm not going to put this one on until I spray this stuff, because I want to spray this and have it kind of weathered and rusted before I put this on. So I'll set that aside and have it ready to go. Also, the tools, they go here. I normally paint them in situ, but I am not going to do that this time. I'm going to paint them off of the model just for ease, and to do something different. So I'm going to put those there and put my photo etch in there, and that's ready to go. So the only thing I have left to glue onto here is the actual exhaust pipe. Now what I did is I drilled that out, and I almost went too far and went all the way through, but I drilled it out and it actually came out really nicely. It's really thin around the edges, which is unusual for the way I do it most times. But anyway, I just need to glue that on here. And then, oh man, glue that on there, and then I can move on to finishing up this back plate here. On step 8 here, which is what I'm working on, we have two C29s, we have B32, which I glued on earlier to make sure everything lined up. Another stuff, B22, we've already used B22. This should read C22. Just a note. All right. So the back is the back step 8 is complete. So now I need to install these, I'm assuming they're fenders, and these brackets here. And with that, we have the back fenders, the brackets, the doors, all of the rear of the upper hull is complete. So that completes step 8. So with step 9, we come to the guns and mounts. And with that, I'm going to end this video right here. And so ends part 3 of the epic chronicle of the Academy 135th scale U.S. Marine Corps M50A1 Ontos. So if you want to see more of this build or more of any of my other builds, think about hitting the subscribe button so you can keep up on what's going on. Also, if you have any hints, tips, questions, comments, concerns, or if you have any experience with this kit, please put your comments in the comments section down below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So, until next time, thanks for watching Plastic Models by Regular Dude, and I will see you all later.